Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. I'm up here in beautiful Scotland to drive the brand new BMW X7 parked behind me. That is the Glen Eagles Hotel where we're staying tonight, and it is absolutely stunning. And I'm here with my best friend Aaron, or Baby Gorilla 81 on Instagram, so you'll get both of our verdicts on the car. It's just a first drive video. I will do a full review later on in the year. I hope you enjoy. Cheers. Okay guys, we are now inside the X7. I've got my good friend Aaron next to me.
Hello guys.
Baby Gorilla 81 on Instagram. Put that below. We are up in beautiful Scotland, as I've already said. We're actually running alongside
Loch Lomond.
And it's just...
picturesque doesn't come close to describing it.
No.
This is pretty wonderful.
Before I start this review, I just want to do a quick shout out to my new brand, controlandshift.com. Please check it out in the description below. All profits that I make from the brand go straight back into my YouTube channel. So please check that link out, guys, and support me with buying a sticker or a t-shirt or whatever you can afford.
Or a hoodie.
Or all of them.
Or everything they make.
Everything they make, yeah, exactly. So, the X7, brand new model. It's the biggest X model that they've ever made, and in fact I'm going to pass over to Aaron to run through a little bit of the history of the X models and what it's all about, where it's come from.
So if we hark back to 1999, we see the introduction of the X5 into the BMW range. Now, that wasn't the first kind of foray into luxury SUVs. Mercedes trumped them by a year by producing the ML back in '98. Lexus also had the RX 300 at the time. The difference was, though, that when BMW created the X5, what they did was create it on the 5 Series platform, and therefore a car platform. The original ML and the RX actually worked on basically truck chassis that were converted for use for SUVs. But what you found from that, obviously, is that you didn't have the comfort of ride, the space in the interior. Everything was essentially designed as an afterthought to a chassis that they already had.
It didn't essentially drive like a car, whereas, like you said, yeah, the original 99 X5, I remember when I drove one, and yes, compared to something, the new X5, it was terrible, but it didn't feel too bad, did it?
And it was a sea change for what people were doing at the time. Now, we find ourselves 20 years later, and, SUVs are ubiquitous across the country. The very fact that Porsche sells more Cayennes than every other model that it makes put together is testament really to where we're going in the market. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here we are in the 6. 7.
That's staying in.
That is
brilliant.
Christ!
That's amazing. There's 3 engine options in the UK at time of launch. There's the 30D, which we're in at the moment, about 265 brake horsepower, but more importantly, about 560 newton meters of torque, I believe. Then there's the 40i, which is the B58, so it's the only petrol engine available at launch. That's about 340 brake horsepower, but a much less torque than the 30D. And then there's a range topping M50D, which is 85 grand on the road, before options, and that is about 400 brake horsepower, but more importantly about, I think it's 800
newton meters of torque,
yeah.
Like that.
So that's, and actually Aaron and I spent the morning in the M50D, and At first, it didn't actually feel too much quicker than
No.
the 30D. But then we soon realised that when you jump back in this, you notice the difference. And also, around town, this is going to feel just as punchy. Off the lights and stuff, the 30D is brilliant. And I think the 30D is going to be the sweet spot until the diesel hate thing becomes sort of missable and you just can't buy diesels anymore. But once you get going, once you start pushing it above sort of 50 miles an hour, the M50D really does hammer. And for something that weighs, most of the models, in fact all three of them, are around the 2.5 ton mark, which is a lot of weight, and that's before you add passengers, etc. So it's a lot of mass to throw around, and therefore I always think that the diesel just deals with that weight so well and so much better than an equivalent petrol model would.
So as I mentioned earlier about the history of the X5, that was built on a 5 Series platform. This X7 is actually a dedicated model in itself, built on a 7 Series platform. Now I think it's important to mention what BMW themselves have been saying to us, which is that it is a car that stands alone, separate within the range. It isn't a bigger X5, it isn't a longer X5. It's a car made on a different platform that is a dedicated model in itself. But maybe that's not quite the truth.
Yeah, so they were, as you say, they were very strong to point out that it's not just a bigger X5. But in my opinion, from driving both quite extensively now and spending a lot of time with the X7, I personally think it is not just, because there's no such thing as just, because the X5 is brilliant, the new X5, but it really, in reality, is a bigger X5. It's a longer version of the X5. It's a slightly more luxurious version of the X5. And in terms of like rear luxury, rear comfort, etc., I think what we should do is actually cut to some videos we filmed earlier in an M50D.
But that we talk about both the second and the third row of seats and how that kind of feels within the passenger compartment as a whole.
Exactly. So I reckon we jump to me in the second
Why don't you get
row.
in the back?
Yeah, alright, cool. Okay, you join me in the back of the X7, not the actual back, but the middle back, so your traditional back seat if you like. This particular car that we're in, the M50D, has got the standard bench at the back, so 3 seats, so it's 2, 3, 2. You can get the captain chairs here, so you can get 2 individual seats that are a bit more luxurious, but I can't imagine them selling too many of that variety because it then brings the total seats down to 6. And at the end of the day, you're going to buy this car because you probably want the 7-seat capability. What's it like in the back here? Well, it's very luxurious, it's very comfortable, it's very spacious. They pitch this as effectively an off-road 7 Series, so I've been comparing it a lot to my 7 Series at home, my long wheelbase 7 Series, and I have to say it has its pros and cons. It's definitely not as luxurious as a 7 Series long wheelbase, in my opinion, at the back. The reason for that is, being an SUV, the floor, a bit like in a Range Rover as well, Range Rover long wheelbase, the X5, they all suffer from it. The floor is actually quite high, and you can probably see my knees are sitting quite high, so you can never, your legs never feel completely comfortable because you just don't feel like you can push them out as far. But I am 6'3", so maybe it's only going to be the tall people that suffer from that. Other things that are positive about being back here over, say, my 7 Series is the space. There's so much. I've got, what, 3 inches of headroom above my head. I've got loads of light in the cabin. Like, looking forward is just lovely. It's just, there's so much. It's an airy place to sit, and I don't feel claustrophobic in the slightest. It probably helps that it's a beautiful sunny day. We've got the blind of the roof open, and with the light interior, it just makes all the difference. So it's a very lovely place to sit in that sort of sense, but it does lack some of the luxuries. So the seats are not quite as comfortable or supportive as the ones in my 7 Series. There's not as much adjustability. These are electric, but they don't have as many adjustments as my 7 Series seats, because that's just got multiple ones, like the front seats have, and you don't have that in this row of seats. But they are very comfortable. You've got your 4-zone climate control. In fact, this car's got the 5-zone climate control, which is an option, and it's the first car ever to feature in the BMW lineup a 5-zone. So you've got your 2 individuals at the front, you've got your 2 individuals here, and you've got a third climate control at the back, so that's the 5th zone. I've got other cool things like USB-C chargers everywhere. At last, manufacturers are putting phone chargers everywhere, not just down there in an awkward place. There's also a 12 volt sort of old school socket down there, but I've also got one right in front of me here that I can plug in. So yeah, this generation, if it's your kids or whether it's your clients or whatever, you just got boom, plug straight in. Like the new X5, you've got the brackets in the back of the seats, so you can buy adapters for your iPods and stuff that just clamp straight in there, so you don't necessarily have to go for the, what's it called, rear entertainment, Aaron?
Yes. Rear entertainment package, yeah.
So you don't have to splash out on that if you think it's just going to be, say, one of your kids using an iPad. You just plug it in and away you go. You've got centre armrest here, just a little cubby hole, drinks holders there. So nothing too out of the ordinary. This is obviously a very spec car. This particular M50D is £110,000 on the road. So you've got the lovely Bowers and Wilkins sound system that does not only sound good, when you look at sort of the door cards and stuff, the speakers themselves are beautiful, and at night they light up, and the ambient lighting in them is just next level. So you're paying for more than just the sound with those. But it's a lovely place to sit, but in my opinion, it's not 7 Series long wheelbase comfort or luxury, even down to things like the headrests. Yes, they've put these lovely soft pillows on them, but they're not, the actual bit behind them is not what you get in a 7 Series. Anyway, now we're going to jump to Aaron. Somehow he's going to get from the driver's seat to the rear seat, to the final row, and he's going to give his summary of what it's like back there with me driving, I guess.
Hi guys, so you find me now in the back, which is the back. Traditionally you'd probably think of with the boot in the X7. Further from what Joe says, you can see what BMW have done back here, that they've tried to intentionally make this part of the passenger cell rather than it being an additional add-on for that kind of benefit of the odd occasion you might want 2 people in the back here. And what I mean by that is you have a continuation of the leather as seen throughout the rest of the passenger cabin. You have your own dedicated cup holders, and as Joe alluded to earlier, this comes with the optional 5-zone climate control. So you have your own climate controlled screen up here, you have a dedicated rear sunroof area as well. So unlike lots of cars where the 3rd row of seat may seem like a slight afterthought, it seems very much that this has been produced with this in mind, you know, that this is going to be an area that's going to be in quite a lot of use. And I think they've done well. The continuation of the leather's very good. It feels a lot more thought out than your standard kind of flat back and flat bottom seats out here in the rear. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention was, unlike Joe, I actually think that the 6-seat configuration may well be quite popular. And the reason I say that is that for people that are going to be looking to perhaps change out of the ubiquitous Land Rover, or even S-Class or 7 Series drivers that might want that extra height, that extra room, that extra capability, I think the 6-seat configuration gives that kind of additional, perhaps executive luxury, perhaps that the bench seat doesn't provide. Don't get me wrong, I'm not sat up here with yards of legroom. I'm not sat here in, you know, palatial luxury with ergonomic seating and heated and ventilation. But compared to many other manufacturers where you are sat on, you know, 2 slabs of wood perpendicular to each other, this seems a lot more like I am part of the car rather than, as I said, an afterthought that's stuck in the back. That was the back of the car. You can obviously see what we're saying in terms of that it feels a lot more thought out as a 7-seater than just kind of 2 additional seats to a 5-seater vehicle. Now, Joe, obviously being Mr. BMW, can probably give you a little bit more insight in terms of how the range is made up, and also, you know, given a car at this price, in terms of how well spec'd that they come and what options are available.
Yeah, so they do come very well spec'd, and as we're saying with a lot of modern cars, because of emissions and stuff and the stringent way that they have to test every single option on every single car, cars are coming very well equipped now, which is great for the end user, the customer, etc. And obviously this being a premium model, the top of the range X, the 7, remember 7 Aaron?
7,
6,
sorry,
7.
It's the number after 6, it's before 8. I get it.
Yeah. Ooh, that was close. This comes with a lot of, in fact, all X7s come with a lot of standard equipment, and some of that is the lovely merino leather, which is the most high quality and softest leather that BMW produced, the same stuff that's in my 7 Series, so that's standard. We've got things like the panoramic roof, which is also a standard feature, soft closed doors,
adaptive LEDs,
yep.
comes standard on 21s,
yes.
22s being the option. They've got 2 different guises of the 22s as well.
Yep.
Joe mentioned the pano roof. That can be optioned as a sky lounge as well,
yes.
which incorporates 15,000 LEDs
yeah.
to give kind of pretty incredible ambient lighting at night.
Yes.
What else? 4-zone climate control, and as we mentioned when you saw us in the rear,
yeah.
that's also optional to 5-zone, the first BMW vehicle to actually offer a 5th zone to its climate.
Yep. And then you look at, so the M50D, obviously a bit like the M50D in the X5 range, also has an extra bit of standard equipment, things like 22-inch wheels standard on that, and a few other bits, like it has a LSD on the front axle, I believe, and a few other bits and bobs. So as with always, the M model comes with a bit more standard equipment than any other models, but obviously check the configurator out for, you know, in-depth options, etc. There are some optional packages,
as everyone does nowadays.
Exactly, which consists of the premium pack, the visibility pack, which gives you laser lights off the top of my head, the technology pack, and then I think there's an M Sport Plus package. So yeah, there's those packages available on especially these lower models. There's also an X-Drive something off-road package or something.
So what it's called is it's an off-road package, and essentially what it does is provide various levels of pre-configured setup. So you have a gravel setup,
yep.
a rock setup. So for example, as a brief description of how they work, you set it in gravel, immediately you get a 20mm rise in ride height.
Yep.
It moderates your throttle responses, etc., according to the terrain. If you go to rock, it adds another 20mm again to the ride height, and again, that's when you're going to have even more kind of intricacies about how it responds to your throttle and braking inputs as well.
Yeah, and I think the difference, it's what, 80mm up and down?
There's
in
a
total?
full 80. You start at essential. Rock is 40 above. When you go above 85 miles an hour, there's an automatic drop by 20, and then there's an additional 20 below that is essentially created for load space. So if you're having to put something large in the car, lots of shopping, etc., you can,
or older people, or whatever,
you can lower it. And funny enough, actually,
it's like a comfort access.
You can also lower it to that point from the rear compartment, and I mean the boot compartment.
As we're talking about the off-road capabilities and the suspension sort of travel, the way it goes up and down, I think we should cut to yesterday, where we had the opportunity to take these very cars on a serious off-road track. And I say these very cars, I mean these actual road-going cars on summer tyres with 21 or 22-inch wheels on them. They literally went off-road on an amazing course. So let's cut to that.
This is the Chelsea test.
Chelsea test, okay.
You know, 97% of these, this is where they're going to spend most of their time.
Yeah, it looks just like the King's Road.
It does, it does. Dropping your kids off to Moorhouse.
When you can see the horizon through the sunroof, you know you're going down a steep hill. Okay guys, hopefully you enjoyed that off-roading. We certainly had a lot of fun, and neither of us damaged the car whatsoever. Which was great, and madness when you consider the size of the wheels, etc., and the weight of this car. We're now back on the road, and for the final piece of this video, I'm just going to talk about the driving dynamics of this car, because you know, you're not expecting it to be an M car. It's a big, heavy car, it's a massive car, but it actually does feel pretty good on the road. When you're in comfort, the ride quality is really good. As Aaron discovered a bit earlier, sitting on the far sort of row of seats, you do get thrown around a bit more.
A little bit more, yeah.
Which is a bit like, you know, going back to when you were at school in the school bus, when you sat over the rear axle, it was always this, you know, the worst seat to be in the sense that you felt everything a bit more. It was a bit more exaggerated. But up here, it's very comfortable. Just quickly touch upon driving position. Driving position is good, but I do feel like I'm sitting a bit high. When we both initially sat in the X7 for the first time yesterday, we were both like, whoa, like, can you not sit any lower? And that's not to say I'm looking at the sun visor. The windscreen's massive, but I do feel like I wish I could sit a little bit lower. But that's a small complaint, and I've certainly got lots of room here, so it's not a space issue. Once we come out of this 30 zone, I will put it into sports, and we'll experience what it's like once it gets a bit twisty, and once you start pushing this car a little bit harder. So we're now on some twisty roads. I've put it into sports, which stiffens the chassis or the suspension setup, so the car feels a bit sportier, if you like. The steering feels a bit heavier or number, really, in my opinion. But for a big 2.5, close to 3 ton car, it feels really good actually. There's no roll in the corners. It just sits completely flat, and yeah, it feels good under braking. Feels very stable, and it's as good as you're going to expect a close to 3 ton 7-seater car to feel. We had the M50D out earlier on, and obviously that thing, in a straight line at least, is very quick. It doesn't necessarily feel that much quicker at slower speeds, as we talked about earlier, but once you get above sort of 40-50 miles an hour, it really has a lot of pace to it. But the 30D, it's about as quick as you're going to want a 7-seater car to be, you know. It's not,
especially a car of these dimensions.
Yes, exactly. Oh, what a lovely bit of road, but we've had to slow down for a V-Class. Right. I mean, this car shouldn't be enjoyable on these sort of roads. It just shouldn't. But it feels really, actually not too bad at all. And it's quick enough. Makes a decent sound for a diesel. You know, it's a 6-spot. Yeah, that's. I think that's about it, really. I don't want this video to go on and on and on and on forever. But I
think we've covered most bases about what the X7 represents. Like, you know, both where it sits in the market and I guess what BMW wanted to represent to its buyers as well. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really this is going to appeal to 2 types of people. It's going to appeal to big families that need genuine sort of 7-seat cars, and it's also going to appeal to the chauffeuring market. Yeah, I think it really will.
I think we'll see quite a few of these. I hope we'll see quite a few of these on the chauffeuring scene. Maybe I can get a PTO registered one and run it for a while, because I think a 6-seater with the captain chairs, I think it would be a really, really premium and cool luxury.
Yeah, a good alternative. Yeah. I think a lot of hotels may actually look into buying these, because they are great for clients, you know.
Absolutely. No, really, really nice. Guys, before I say goodbye, just a quick reminder about my brand again, Control and Shift. And also, if you all want to hear everything exactly the same another time, then come over to my YouTube channel. No, jokes aside, I am actually doing a video on this. It will be, you know, the same kind of information, guys, but it would be quite nice if people could go over, have a watch, give me some feedback, you know, be nice in the comments, or don't be nice in the comments, but give it a watch, see what you think, and hopefully it may well spur me on to do a little bit more. Cool. Until next time, take it easy, guys. Thanks for watching.
Take care. Quality's really been taken on board in terms of what they're offering.
They are, yeah. And, you know, I have to say, what do I have to say? The last bit, what do I need to do? Oh yeah, to talk about